Hello everybody, welcome back to another exciting episode of me doing some things. On today's episode, I'm going to be going over the top 5 controllers, video game controllers that I like, starting at the 5th one being the one out of the 5 that I like the least. Not saying I hate it, but it's just not as good as the number 1 spot, which is the one I like the most. So here we go. Alright, so starting off this list, we have the Nintendo Controller. Now, I know what a lot of people are probably thinking, why is the Nintendo Controller number 5 when it is like one of the best controllers ever made? I love the Nintendo Controller, don't get me wrong. The simplicity of it, you've got your D-pad and you've got your B and A button here, start and select. It doesn't get any better than that. And it is extremely comfortable in your hand. You know, there's nothing wrong with this controller. It's just, compared to the other ones that I feel are better than it, they offer more features because the games got more immersive as time went on. So, but I still love this controller. Nevertheless, it is one of the best controllers ever made, in my opinion, by Nintendo. One of the best. So that's why this one is starting at number 5, because I have 4 more that I think are just a little bit better for their own reasons. Number 4, we have the Sony PlayStation 2 controller. So I chose this controller over the Xbox and Xbox 360 and Xbox One. I'm just going to use the Xbox One controller as a comparison, and the only reason is because like the Xbox and the Xbox 360, they haven't really changed a whole lot over time. I mean, I know some of the buttons are different, but the reason I prefer the PlayStation 2 controller over the Xbox controller is I find it more comfortable for myself to have the analog sticks right next to each other rather than offset. And I know a lot of people are saying, well, it's more natural this way. It's better this way. It's not, you know, this thumb coming down. But it's actually, for me personally, it's just, this was more comfortable for me. And also because I grew up with a PlayStation 2 and I didn't have an Xbox growing up, so the PlayStation 2 controller was more comfortable for me. Plus I just love this controller. There's not a whole lot to say about it. You know, you've got your face buttons here, your triangle, your X, square, and circle. You've got your left and right analog sticks. You've got your directional pad. You've got R1 and R2, L1 and L2. It's all convenient. It's all in one nice location. I like the I guess trigger buttons is what you could call them up here, because for me on the Xbox controllers, these triggers are better. So if they would have just probably put these style triggers on the back of this, I know they did something like that for the PS4, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. But I like to rest, you know, it's just to go up and down. I don't know. It's probably a moot point. It's probably just like a little complaint that doesn't matter at all. But I find this controller to be way more comfortable for me while I'm playing video games. So that's why it is number 4. So coming in at number 3, this was a tough one because the number 3 and the number 2 spot were neck and neck, and I chose this one over the other one for the number 3 spot for its own reasons, and I'll get to that. But the number 3 is the Nintendo GameCube controller. I love the Nintendo GameCube. It's one of my favorite systems of all time. I love the Nintendo GameCube controller. This controller right here has seen some combat. I'm telling you, the C-stick is destroyed. And the only reason this happened is because this is one of my childhood GameCube controllers. I didn't own the GameCube when I was a child, but I had a friend that owned it, and I was over at his house. We hung out constantly, and so basically this is my childhood GameCube controller. He ended up giving me the GameCube controllers and a bunch of the games that we used to play growing up. This thing has seen some wear and tear. The only reason it looks like this is because a TV fell on it. And that should say something right there. A TV, I'm talking like a big, this thing had to have been like, oh, I don't know, maybe it had to have been like a 50-inch tube TV, so you know those things ain't messing around. And it fell on this and another controller. Actually, the other controller that I have from my childhood, the main analog stick the grippy is completely rubbed off of it. But this controller is one of the best controllers I think ever made by Nintendo, in my opinion. And the reason is because all your buttons are conveniently where you need them. It's got these cool triggers right here. It's got your little Z button up here. I use this controller even today when I play Super Smash Bros. Brawl. I'll prefer this controller over any of the other controllers. I was playing Super Smash Bros. Wii U here not too long ago, and I just didn't like the Wii U controllers. I know they kind of tried to make it look, but there's just something about, if I'm playing Smash Brothers, I have to have this controller or I'm not playing, basically. I mean, I can play. I tried to play Brawl with the Wiimote, and that's just not happening. This is the definitive Smash Brothers controller of all time, and what Nintendo needs to do, which I don't know if they've already done it yet because I don't really keep up on the news, but for all the later entries of Smash Brothers game, they need to release a controller that is this controller. They need to re-release this controller for the newer systems for Smash Brothers. I don't know if they do that. If they do, good on you. If they don't, get to it. Okay, so the number 2 spot, like I said, this controller and the number 3 spot, which is the GameCube controller, were neck and neck for me. But I chose this one because I really enjoy this controller, and I know what a lot of people are going to say, this is probably one of the worst controllers that Nintendo has ever released, but I don't understand why, because I love it, and that is the Nintendo 64 controller. So a lot of people say that this is one of the worst controllers that Nintendo ever made, because the argument that everybody likes to argue is that if you want to switch from your analog stick up to your directional pad, you have to jump. You have to jump over, and of course with the L and R buttons like this. Me personally, I have never played a Nintendo 64 game that has required me to be doing this and jumping back and forth constantly. I've never played a game like that. The games that I've played generally stay into this area, and the directional pad is used as like a menu or something like that, so when your character or whatever you are or whatever you're doing is stopped for that time, you can just jump over. Plus, I don't even really go all the way on the outside. I'll just kind of reach over, and I mean, yeah, it's not super comfortable, but I've never had a problem with it. I love this controller because I grew up with the Nintendo 64, so a lot of the reason behind me liking this is probably nostalgia, but that's okay because I think we all have a little nostalgia every now and then. But nevertheless, I think that the Nintendo 64 controller, and I know a lot of people are probably thinking, how in the hell could the Nintendo 64 controller beat the GameCube controller and the original Nintendo controller? And it's not that it beat it, it's just that I like it a little bit better than those controllers. I like the stick, and yeah, I know the common complaint, you're in intense gaming, and then your fingers slipping off the stick, and a lot of people talk about Mario Party games as being the ruiner of these things. I don't have the Mario Party games for the 64, so I can't say yes or no about that. I mean, I believe it, but I just haven't experienced it. But these controllers, in my opinion, are really good. And that's just my opinion. So moving on now to the number 1 best game controller that I have out of my consoles. This one wasn't really difficult for me because looking back, like again, it's a childhood thing. Looking back at my childhood, it was the controller basically I used a lot growing up, and that is the Super Nintendo controller. I have the Super Nintendo controller, the Super Famicom style one. I love this one. This one here is my childhood controller as well. And boy, has this thing seen some action as well. It's got some grime and nastiness under there, which I gotta clean it out. But there's not a whole lot to say about this controller. It took what they did with the Nintendo controller and just made it better. And when you're taking something as awesome and as simple as the Nintendo controller and you make it better, that's just all the more credit that you get. I love the way the buttons are. They're conveniently placed. For platformers, you know, you press and hold Y and then tap the B button to jump. There isn't any game that I have in... Well, okay, I take that back, because the one game I don't like playing with this controller, I prefer to use the SNES QuickShot controller. You know, the little arcade stick style one, and that's Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. I wish I could combine those two. I wish I could have like a joystick to move him around, because since he's on that, you know, the way that he is, you know, moving around and stuff, I just find it more comfortable to use the joystick. But there isn't any other game, as far as I know, that, you know, isn't perfected with these controls. And I know there's a lot of games with bad controls, but the ones I have good controls, and this controller is the best controller that I own and that I have. And that's not being completely, you know, like, these are the only consoles that I have, because I have Xbox, I have got Atari, I've got oh shit, what is it? That might be it. That might have been... No, I know I have other ones. I'm just having trouble thinking right now. I've got like Pong consoles. I've played Sega consoles like Genesis. I've got a Genesis. I don't like the Genesis controllers. That's why I didn't use it. I don't like like the Dreamcast controller. I didn't like that. Sega Saturn controller, meh. But those are just my favorite controllers, and I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. And I'm gonna go ahead and come back later and do a favorite games from each of these consoles. So I will do one game per console that I discussed here. So one one Nintendo, one Super Nintendo, one Nintendo 64, one PlayStation 2, and one GameCube. So I will be doing that in the next video. I hope you guys enjoyed. Like, comment, subscribe, do all that kind of fun stuff, and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.